That being said, let's move over to some buys for this week. My first guy that I'm going to hit on is going to be James Conner. He is currently the RB17 right now. But in all reality, I want to buy all Cardinals. Okay, the Cardinals have one of the best remaining schedules for any offense moving forward. But Conner right now, he's currently handling around 62% of the snaps, 57% of the rush attempts. He's seeing 11% target share, which is pretty healthy for him. He's been pretty reliable, scoring 14 or more PPR points in every game but 2 this year. He ranks 5th in red zone touches, 9th in explosive run rate, and 1st in evaded tackles. But he has the easiest fantasy playoff schedule with matchups against the Patriots, the Panthers, and the Rams. And so, honestly, James Conner is a smash during that span. And if one of you have, you're holding them. But if you can try to get him, especially coming off a bye, it's a little bit easier to acquire players that are coming off bye weeks. So, and like I said, whether it's Marvin Harrison, whether it's James Conner, whether it's Kyler Murray, whether it's Trey Benson as like a throw-in or a pickup off the waiver wire, like I wanted access to all of these guys because their schedule to close out the year is absolutely awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of the same route I went because in true TFA fashion, we didn't really talk about who any of our guys were going to be beforehand. But that was the same route I went. I went with some guys who were going to be a little bit cheaper, a little easier to get that way. Even for folks who are trying to like claw their way in, or for people who are kind of already sitting at the top and maybe just trying to solidify the rest of their roster, or even just get like a nice depth option. That's kind of the route I went. But I'll lead off with Courtland Sutton, and especially a wide receiver where we've had so many injuries as well. I thought wide receiver could be a spot that some people might be looking at. But over the past 4 weeks, Courtland Sutton, 38 targets, 9th in target share among wide receivers during that time. And their playoff schedule is really nice as well with the Chargers, Colts, and Bengals. That Cincy game could potentially cause some issues just because it's going to be a Week 17 game in Cincinnati. So who knows what the weather is going to be like when that game gets here. But it's not like this is going to be a complete shock to a team traveling from Denver either. So they're obviously used to the elements up there. The usage is just so strong, and Bo Nix has been starting to come around. And now his team is going to be in the playoff hunt as well. They have a Week 14 bye. So if you are trying to, kind of claw your way in, might not be the best option just because you're obviously not going to be able to plug them into your lineups during Week 14, which could leave you sitting out in the cold for your fantasy playoffs. But that bye week could prove pretty useful for the Broncos as they try and get everything ready for that final stretch of games for them to try and head into the postseason.
Yeah, I also kind of like low-key. It's not a buy, but Devon Vele has started to come on a little bit as well as more of an ad. This Broncos offense is, in all things considered, I mean, this team is devoid of a lot of talent. It's not like they have a good tight end. It's basically Courtland Sutton and a ragtag group of players. So I think as they add more to this offense, and I think they're going to have some money to spend this offseason through the draft, like I think this team's going to get, is going to continue to get better, and this is going to be an offense. And honestly, the AFC West in a couple of years could be an absolute juggernaut to try to get through because with the way that Justin Herbert, the Chargers have looked, what the Broncos are starting to build, and if the Raiders can ever stop being the Raiders, then maybe they can join the party. But the AFC West is looking pretty good. So I'm gonna keep it going, and I'm gonna talk about another running back for me, and it's gonna be Tyrone Tracy. And again, another coming off their bye week, but like I've said, this guy is taking over this backfield. And he's been really effective on a per touch basis. 9th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 3rd in yards after contact per attempt, 3rd in explosive run rate. He is the RB34 in fantasy points per game. So that's where it kind of comes in. Like he's not going to be as much cost to acquire. But he's been really, really good down this stretch. And the Giants actually have the 5th easiest remaining schedule for running backs. They get matchups against the Ravens, Falcons, Colts in the fantasy playoffs. The Ravens isn't as good. But what we have seen most teams do is really pepper their running backs against the Ravens, kind of use their screen passes as an extension of the run. Saw that with Chase Brown where he was targeted 11 times. Obviously, that's something that Tyrone Tracy can do. And we have seen Tyrone Tracy be really good in bad matchups before because against the Eagles a few weeks ago, the Eagles are one of the best run defenses in the league, and he had one of his best games of the season in that game. So I don't think it's the end of the world for that, but just really love this spot. Love the matchups that Tyrone Tracy has coming. And if you're really looking for a running back, I think he's somebody that you could probably go out and look to acquire.
I will go ahead and double down on the rookie running backs here. I'm going to go Bucky Irving. The touches have really consolidated since the weird Sean Tucker involvement we had a few weeks ago. But after the Giants this week, the Bucks get the Panthers, Raiders, Chargers, and Cowboys. Outside of the Chargers game, who we saw some chinks in that armor with Chase Brown, the strong game that he had. But outside of the Chargers game, those other three teams are all in the top 8 in terms of fantasy points allowed per game to running backs. So I think Bucky Irving is someone who, if you are able to get this done ahead of time before he goes out and gets this game against the Giants, that's definitely something I would look to do. Like you were mentioning with, guys coming off of bye week, that could help as well. But Bucky Irving is definitely somebody I'd be looking to acquire if I possibly can.
Yeah, I really like that call, and he's been really good this year. And he was somebody that that early in the process I wasn't as high on, but as the offseason went by, I started to get more and more high on him, and started to become somebody that I felt like was going to be a real threat. I wouldn't shock me if, especially after the bye, that we start to see more and more where Bucky Irving's more of just the early down back, handling first and second down, and getting some pass catching work in there as well. Where Rashad White just becomes more of a PPR option only because that's all the work we're seeing, because honestly, Bucky Irving has been awesome so far this year
Yeah.
as a runner. So he deserves that expanded role that he's seeing. So I want to hit on the last guy. For me, it's going to be Brian Thomas. I get it. There's not a lot of excitement with the Jaguars right now and their offense or their defense for that matter. But it does sound like Trevor Lawrence has a shot to return after their bye week. So that is a big positive. And we did see finally Brian Thomas kind of break out after a little mini slump where he went 5 for 82 last week against the Lions. Now, granted, some of that might have been in garbage time, but we don't care in fantasy football. Fantasy points are fantasy points. But Brian Thomas has been one of the most productive rookie wide receivers through the first 9 weeks of the season before he suffered that injury. Then he's kind of had a little bit of regression, but he kind of bounced back a little bit. But I just want people to understand that how good Brian Thomas has been this year. He's been 16th in yards per route run, 19th in yards per team pass attempt, 9th in separation score, 10th in EPA per play, 8th in fantasy points per route run. Like I said, I mean, he's been one of the better rookie wide receivers this year. And honestly, it's been kind of an up and down hill for rookie wide receivers this year, where Marvin Harrison has flashed at times. Malik Neighbors looks really good, but then he started to struggle a little bit recently. But I think that has more to do with the quarterback play than anything. But like Brian Thomas has been one of the more consistent rookie wide receivers this year, and that is despite playing in one of the worst offenses, if not the worst offense in the league so far. The way this team has played so far this year, so I think Brian Thomas is going to be an absolute baller moving forward, especially next year. But as far as the rest of the season concerned, they have a really favorable remaining schedule with matchups against the Texans coming out of their bye. They get the Titans twice, the Jets, and the Raiders. All matchups that you feel pretty decent about. And so I think Brian Thomas is going to be definitely somebody that can definitely help you down the stretch. And especially if Trevor Lawrence is able to return. And remember, they lost Christian Kirk. And not just that, they just lost Gabe Davis to IR. And so this is a very thinned out wide receiver room right now. And so, once we come off bye here, and as long as Trevor Lawrence is able to return, which that seems like the reports were, it could be absolute wheels up for Brian Thomas to finish the season. So I think Brian Thomas is a definite buy low right now.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. Like you said, especially with Gabe Davis hitting IR. So I like that call a lot. Last guy I'm going to talk about is going to be Jacobi Meyers. Has a really rough 2-game stretch ahead between this week and next week. But then after that, my friend, the seas part, the skies open up, the fantasy gods come down. They give Jacobi Meyers a little pat on the back, tell him, and as a congratulations for making it through that stretch, the Raiders get the Bucks, Falcons, and Jags in the fantasy playoffs. And outside of week 11, Myers had been posting really strong usage numbers and fantasy output. So I think after these 2 games, he bounces back. So not someone that, like, if you're trying to make your way into it, you're probably going to want to go after. But I think in like 12-team leagues, like if you're like a middling team, like if you feel good about making the playoffs, if you're trying to like solidify maybe that flex spot or your wide receiver 3 spot, something like that, I think Jacobi Meyers makes a ton of sense for those types of teams.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I think that's a really good call. Jacoby Myers is saying like a ridiculous 30% target share since Diop was traded. So he's been really good. It's basically him and Brock Bowers. So you love that. The consolidated target shares, not a lot of stuff you have to worry about. So I definitely think that is a very good call.